Humans are creatures of habit. The average person needs a lot of consistency in their daily routine. The average person, if they have to deal with too many variables, meaning that there is something different to adapt to each day, they would not do well because their mind would become overwhelmed, they would get emotionally frustrated and eventually give up. And when you're constantly moving and changing environments, that's what you're doing. Your mind is seeing new information and processing it and working harder to understand what it needs to do. I've talked about that in the past. And so for some people, that constantly being uncomfortable is frustrating, not exciting. I think in the beginning, most people are excited by seeing new things, doing new things, getting out of their daily routine that's become too predictable. So you see, we start to get into the word balance, right? I mean, I think if you do the same thing day in, day out, et cetera, you want something different, you want something new, you want something challenging. If you play the same video game day in and day out and you constantly beat it and you score the highest score, you get bored with that video game and you want a new challenge. But if you play a video game and you put it on too hard of a level and you never win, you will get frustrated and you won't want to play that game anymore. And the nomadic lifestyle is basically like upping the level of change and being uncomfortable in your life. It's a challenge, not because you can't do it, but because it requires a mind that needs to constantly adapt. And you can't get too comfortable. If you start to go to the same places every day, the same places to sleep, the same places to just do your daily errands, there's nothing wrong with that if you're complying with the law. And because every place that you go to visit, they have a time frame that you can do certain things. But what I've seen in the nomadic lifestyle is many people, they get stuck and they're not willing to change their environment and keep it moving because their mind cannot handle that level of being uncomfortable. I remember being in New York City and walking around Manhattan, and the cops who were on the daily beat, meaning there's certain cops in New York City that they just walk around the blocks. They don't go on patrol cars. They just walk around the blocks to, make sure that things are on the up and up and that, nothing's going crazy. And many times how they deal with the homeless, because there's a high population of homeless in New York City, even in the winter with the bad weather. Many times what they tell them is that if they sit in one place too long, that they have to keep it moving. And I sometimes I thought to myself when I used to see that, I said, why don't they just keep it moving? Why are they just sitting in one spot? Some of them were panhandlers, so a lot of times they would sit in congested areas where they could get some tourists to give them money. So that was part of the hustle. Then the other part of the hustle, which I realized in life, and I even seen it in Florida, I was in a poor section of Florida, and I saw people living out of their cars, and 10 minutes up the road was a beautiful part of Florida, and I wondered why they stayed in the bad part. And what I've come to realize over time is a lot of people will just stay where they're at because they don't want to deal with being uncomfortable. Being uncomfortable means you're changing to a new environment. Your mind has to work a little bit harder to level up to the differences in your environment. And for some people, it's just mentally exhausting. So the nomadic life is being uncomfortable with change. You can stay in the same place for a little while, and you can enjoy that, but you have to be conscious that you're in the public. And when you're in the public, there's a protocol. It's not your house. It's a shared environment. You have certain rights, but those rights are within the confines of the general public rights. Your rights can't infringe on someone else. And many times, because human nature wants to settle in and form habits and routines, people start to abuse certain rights. They park at the same places every day, past the allowable hours. They start to abuse the privilege. And look, there's gray areas, and I'm not making like citizens arrest because everyone does it. But I think that I think that many people are not able to sustain this life because of that. It eventually wears on your mind. And even for me, eventually I may get a home base or I may do something different, I don't know. But 2.5 years living this life, I can tell you, it wears on you. And it's not for everyone, I could definitely say that. It's for some people, it is a great opportunity to travel, to see different things, to change your life, to change locations, to take a chance in life on a career or your own business. But count the cost. Be honest with yourself, your mentality, your mindset. A lot of times people ask me and say, Sam, your videos are good, I like them, but I really would like for you to show me more stuff. And that's why I may not have a huge channel. Some channels are huge, they just show the same thing over and over, like, how do you live in your car? This is where I keep my canned goods. This is how I put on my visor. This is how I run my fan. And people eat it up, and I understand that. But that will only get you past a couple weeks living in your car. Really, what I share with you guys, which a lot of people don't want to hear, is a mindset. Okay? Because for you to sustain a life that's so abnormal, that requires so much change and adaptation, the words that I share with you many times are more important than how do you stay cool at night. Because what I could tell you is, you can be cool at night, you can be warm in the winter, but if you don't have a mindset of dealing with constant change, of accepting the fact that you're in a public environment and it's not yours, okay, and that you have to adhere to some rules and regulations. I've heard many people comment on my channel when I talk about buying a home base and maybe in a HOA, a homeowners association. They hate homeowners associations because they're like a mini government with rules and regulations. But so is the regular public. And without that, people just do whatever they want with no regard for any type of protocol. So, you have to be conscious that a mindset, that understanding of society, of yourself, of what it's really going to take to live this non-conforming life, and not just be someone that jumps in their car and has a solar panel and some idea of what this life is just be cautious. Okay? Be cautious, but be willing to take the risk with the right mindset. The mindset of not constantly, but at times being uncomfortable, adapting, changing. Not feeling like you own a certain parking lot or a certain place you don't. You have to keep it moving. You have to keep it moving. You have to keep it moving. And those who don't keep it moving, they become entitled, okay? And then they start to think they own something that is not theirs. And then, even though they got away with parking at a certain place for a certain amount of time, for a certain period of time, now all of a sudden someone tells them to move and they lash out because they feel like they're entitled to there. They've been parking there so long and no one's bothered them. But guys, that's not what this life is. And that's why I think once in a while, even if you can stay in a certain area, I think you should just keep it moving a little bit just to keep your juices flowing, okay? And to remind you of, you're not alive, you're not thriving, when you just start to sit idle too long. But we want to, because human nature, again, is habits, routines, and not too many variables. Every time you move and you leave the town that you've been in for a little bit, your mind has to be challenged again. And so I just want to share some thoughts with you. That's it. And we'll talk again soon. Peace, love, and stay positive.